Hey everybody. So in today's video, what we're going to do is go through a list of what I consider the bigger movers of the day. There were some that were just absolutely rocketed, and we're going to go through this in alphabetical order, but there are some that just really ripped, and we're going to go over why they did and what to do about them to see if there's ways to get into them or not. But let's just get started here. As always, subscribe to the channel and click all notifications because what we go over is timely. Every Saturday tomorrow, we do a top 10 list, top 10 stocks to look at next week. They do fairly well, so it's definitely something you want to be notified of if you're interested in investments and trading. So let's just jump into it. AHT is the very first one we're going to go over. And let me just close this down a little bit and let's open this up. Let me pull this down here. Okay. So everyone can see this volume curve, right? See how we're riding up. So what we're going to do is get rid of that so we can really zoom in on the chart and see what's going on here. And you have these wicks over here, right? But let's just get rid of those for a minute because let's focus on this. So what's really important about this chart to me is that you had this trend line that you've broken and now you have a higher high. So it's very clear that you're out of this, right? And it's very clear that you're above this little support, right? And you're heading towards this level, which is 588. Now through this, you have a pretty clear shot of this level. And what happens with these is, as I try to explain, these are wedges. So this is really a wedge, but out of that wedge, there is something going on. And what's going on here, you clone them, right? And you actually have a channel. So that channel it's really called like a falling channel. Some people just call it a falling wedge. It doesn't matter. What matters is what it's telling you. It's telling you that the issue started here on this reversal. This is telling you on this end that it's probably changed, which means that this becomes our target. So longer term, this is really what we're looking for up here. So that would be the first area that I would look at. Now, if you overlay this with just a couple quick things, you can kind of get an understanding of what's going on here. So this is the 200, 50, and 21. So here's your 200, here's your 50, and you're stopping at your 21. So the next move for this stock is going to be to close above your 21-day moving average, which would probably be the high of the day, which would be 540. So that's really what we want to see. We want to see a close above that. Now, longer term, and it's the end of the week, so we get to look at weekly charts, you can see that this thing was just an absolute monster at one point. Just an absolute monster. And what's so interesting about this is where you were pre-pandemic. So you were at $23, $24. This never came back like some of the other stocks, did during the pandemic. So it's definitely something to consider. There's obviously more to the story than this, but that's definitely something to consider that we're not even remotely close to where these are. And people would argue, well, they're not earning the same amount of money as they were before. I would argue that neither is Caesars or MGM, but they're hitting new highs. So it's something, sometimes this happens and you find these little anomalies. And this has the potential to be one. So it's definitely something I would put on your radar. AHT for those that like playing some of the smaller names. And you can see here on the weekly, you're just forming a little wedge. Eventually you're going to have that higher high day and then it should just start clicking up again. And, we're talking about $7, but eventually that $7 gets you above this, right? When you get above that 582 level, which we already talked about, where's my next high? I mean, you can just start going through them and seeing the potential of this before you get to any levels of resistance. So again, this has pretty significant potential. BABA, let's start on the weekly. So I'm not a huge fan of this company, and it's just one of those stocks that every time you get in it, some news hits and you have an issue with it. So I tend to avoid it for that reason. That said, you have had a weekly downtrend that was broken this week. So it doesn't really matter what I think. It matters what's going on, right? So you can see on the weekly how we're just holding right here. And that's our VWAP that we just happened to stop on, right? So volume price VWAP is where we just happen to find a base and build a base. And what's happening is now we're breaking above there. Now for confirmation of that break, this is on the weekly, you need to get to 245. Well, there's all kinds of resistance before then. The 21-week 243 level, but this looks like it's going to be a major problem because the way this trend line cuts it, and this one's up here. But look at this on BABA. Okay, here's your point of control. Now, there were several things this stock needed to do today, and it did all of them. It needed to get above the 224.50 level, the 225.40 level. It needed to get above the purple line, which is point of control by the volume price line over here. It did all three in a day. So I think that's really significant to note. I can say anything that I want, but when you see things like that, you really need to pay attention to it because it is significant. And it's significant because people are watching. I'm not the only one that's watching these levels, right? So when you're watching these levels, you start understanding, hold on, let me pull that one back down here. You'll start understanding why you're watching those levels, right? And I'm not the only one that can spot levels, right? We all read charts differently. And I try to explain this to people all the time that are learning charts, is that when you're looking at a chart, you have to understand that it is a science. There is a science behind it, but there's also an art to it. And you need to keep that in mind. So everybody's looking at the same thing. We're all going to interpret it a little differently. But on this daily, breaking through all this, if I get rid of all this, okay, and I just said, this was my level. Now, this is very interesting, right? This is where I started this whole thing. This is where the break started down that became this base. So now if I get above this 229 level, okay, the next spot for me is here, 240. So this is walking itself up and does have potential. So I understand why people are looking at it. And if you want to play the name, play the name. If it does turn, there's a lot of potential for this, but you have a lot of, news risk or event risk, I guess is the best way to say it. So let's just keep on rolling. CCIV was one we were looking at the other day, and it just can't get above that line, can it? But let's look at this on the weekly now that we can look at weekly charts, and we'll just see if this gives us anything more definitive. And it really doesn't, right? It really doesn't. It just basically is telling us already what we already know, but sometimes it's helpful to just get another opinion, and we'll put the indicators back in, and let's just go through these indicators so we can understand what's going on here. So really, let me just pull this out, and then we're just going to open this up. So really what you're doing is you're just riding this trend line. Every time you get near it, you're rejecting. The 21 is holding you up, right? So maybe you make another attempt at it. If you break the 21, you need to get out because that's going to get you below point of control. And you're using this volume shelf right now as support. So keep your eye on it. This is really what you're looking for, a breakout there on CCIV. There's really not much more to go over it besides that. That's what we're looking for. So this is CCO, and I usually don't pay attention to the smaller ones. Let me just make sure I get that right. Nope, that was right the first time. Okay, so what you're going to see here is this. You have a little wedge right here. Okay, you got a little wedge right there, and you have a little tiny one right here. So what do I like about this and why do I want to show it? There's a couple things, and let me pull out some bells and whistles. But this is what was so interesting to me, and I do love looking at charts, but let me move that up so you can understand where I'm going with this. So this is the bottom, right where we hit here, and then we bounce off, reverse, and start going higher. Look at this volume shelf in here that we're fighting with. What's going to happen when we get through that shelf and through the top of this? This is going to move. Now, where it goes, I don't know. We have a channel right here, so it's probably going to get to the top of that channel. But I'd like to see what it does because this can move. Now, if we look at this on the weekly, before we get into it, this was a monster. Okay, this was a stock that was around a long time. So there are levels to this, and there are things that have already broken trend-wise that would lead you to believe that this has the probability of going higher, right? Getting over this level. If we get over this level, where are we going? So, and just think like that for a moment. If you get over this level, hold on, let me draw that a little bit better. And we can draw into this. But this is what's so great, or at least I think it's great, about looking at charts on the weekend, right? You get a week chart, and at the end of the month, we get a monthly chart. So, but I don't know. But for me, it's exciting. But so here you are, 543. See this 543 level? That's where you're going. So if I get through this, I can get up to here. So this is why it's important to look at multiple time frames. What is this telling me? It's telling me that I could have an issue at this line, the 200 week. I haven't been above the 200 week since 2.5, 3 years. So that's definitely something to consider. But look at this. This is really one of the reasons why after I ran through the charts, I added this one. I get about a couple hundred requests for charts. So if you don't see your chart, don't take offense to it. It's just that it means that I don't think it's significant for the very short term. That's all. This is what I'm looking for. Look at this. Look at this volume spike today, right? We did 10 times the normal average daily volume today. And what happened? It hardly moved. So that's a lot of stock that on a red day that's being sold. And we can look at this on the volume. There's a lot of stock that's being sold and dumped that just got eaten. A lot. So I really think that's very important to understand. To me, it means that this has the potential to go higher. So a little one to watch there. Crowd, I know a lot of people are watching this one, and I guess they're a little concerned. And I'm going to look at the weekly on this in a moment. I'm not remotely concerned about this. This is one I have in the newsletter. If you don't get the newsletter, there's a free weekly edition that comes out every Wednesday, so you can kind of follow along. And that one, there's a link in the description and in the bio to get it. So what we have here, very simply, is a nice little wedge. We kind of tried to break out of that wedge today and cause ourselves some pain. And then guess what we did? We didn't break it, did we? And look how tight and exact this is, right? Gotta love option expiration day. So 249.23, right? Not once, but twice, okay? And you just hung right in here. Now what? So nothing has changed for me. I'm still above my major support, which was resistance, right? It flips when we broke it, and I'm forming a flag. Now, and I still have all this overhead up here to run to. So if it's going to sit here for a week, I'm in no hurry. I'm fine with it. It's when it sells down and causes me pain that I become concerned. And think about it this way. If you saw this chart on a weekly, would you be running out of this? Was this something that you'd be like, boy, I better get out of this? No, you'd be looking at it and going, man, I got to find a way in, right? And look at this. If you come here, from here to this base, right, is 80 points or 32%. And if you look at that 80 points times 250, gets you to about, right, let's just call it what it is. Let's just call it 230 or 330, right? But 330, 335, really, because the number changes. You have to focus on the percentage, not the points on the move. But here, let me get rid of that for a minute. And you'll see how that coordinates usually with whatever I had as a stock price. So I was at like 350 based upon the time it gets up to this level. But you can see where you're going and what your potential is with this. So for me, I have no problem holding on to this. Again, if you saw that weekly chart, you'd be all over it and buying it. This one was really kind of funky. And it's like you run up and you break. And then you run up, and this is setting up for me. It looks like to me, you're setting up to break again. And I'm just going to kind of walk through why I say that. So you see this wick, every bar is met by selling, every single one. And then what happens to the other day? Boom. So I wanted to show this for whoever's in it. And this is because it's significant. So the stuff that I show on here is significant, every single chart. That's what I try to do. But it doesn't mean that they're significant in a good way. So while you're still in an upper trend line here, and we can just draw this real quick from here to here. Okay, oops. So what is that telling me? Right, let's get rid of this. So what is this telling me? Right, it's telling me that we're going higher. I'm in a channel, right? I mean, that's what everyone can see. And we all know to make our channels, we just clone these lines, and then we just kind of see where they fit in. And that really kind of becomes the upper end of the channel. And that one's not great. You could make an argument that those wicks really should be here. So what is this telling us? It's telling us that we hit the top of this channel, bounced off of it, touched the low, and now we try to get back up, but we can't. And what are we forming? You're forming an H, right? Which means that you're setting up to break this. And here's where your break is. right? Your break was today. And that's why I put this on here. So like, that's not the action that you want to see today in an FINV. It's just not. No matter how you slice it, you could argue, oh, well, you know, it didn't really take out that lower low. Well, actually what it did was, see this wick right here? This was all price rejection, meaning nobody would sell it. What it did was get sellers all day, meaning that they probably don't want to show you what they're really trying to sell, right? So they kind of did it a little orderly. So you're going to need to hold. Oops. You're going to need to hold right here. Okay. And if you don't hold that line, you're going to wind up going through it. And that's 920. So that's definitely something for you to watch. If you're in this, if you look at the indicators, I got it. You think that it might hold this 21 day. If I break this, this is way more powerful than that 21 day. So just keep that in mind. You could easily, if this breaks, trade down to this 50-day 775 before you found any level of support, especially after the huge run it's had. I mean, this was a $2 stock. So just keep that in mind. FRX. So the reason why I wanted to do this one was you had this huge move, but let's go over this huge move. Where did we stop, right? Stopped right here, 1225. Okay, we try to get through that, but it just happens to coincide with these wicks. How many of these wicks? Oops, let's click on this. Just so you can see what I'm saying. How many times do we have a wick there? Bonk, bonk. And then we have wicks on this side. See how these lines become support and resistance? Bonk, 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 right? So that's where you're looking at it and going, what am I doing? Why am I in this still? And I get it. These are curling up. You think you're going to get this. Maybe you do. So you'd have to start looking at some things and determining if that's a possibility. One of those things is relative volume. You know, you are getting relative volume spikes. So maybe that does happen. Maybe it doesn't. Let's look at the RSI. The RSI is telling you that we're on point for this to happen. So maybe it does. But what you're going to really need to do, now that you have all that data, is now you have to sit down and take a look at it and go, all right, so my level really is 1227, 1225 area. If I can't close above there, and, you know, bullishly, then I might be at a top. And this could just be being played with, and that's why it's up. It looks like it's an acquisition corp, which means it's a SPAC. Somebody's doing something with it. So just keep that in mind. But I'd watch this 1225, 1230 level. Just keep your eye on that. This FUV, it keeps setting up and then just coming back in. But we're going to look at the weekly, which is interesting on this. And, you know, I really did not want to see, this is like the worst case scenario close for this today for me. I think that this is setting up for a big run, but looks like we got some more work to do, because really what we did was ran all the way up and then sold right back down. So we got through our resistance line, ran up, but then what happened? We closed right under the wedge. It's like the opposite of what you want to see, right? It's just, you don't want to see that. So what can we do about that? Well, there's not much you can do about it. You just have to watch it, right? If you're going to stay in it. But I just want to point this out, and it's a lot cleaner here. Okay. That's your weekly. So on your weekly on FUV, you are above your 50 week, you're above your 21 week, and you are at the top of this wedge line. So if I was going to break this, this is the time that it would happen. First attempt fails, second attempt comes down, right? And it would go. Now, if I break below this level, depending upon how long you're trying to stay in this, if I broke below that 1340, that would probably mean that I need more time. So that's what you would use as a stop if you're long-term on it. If you're short-term on it, it's a very simple trade. Now that you're in this, it means you're probably going to that 1390 level, right? So if you break a lower low here and take out that low, get out of the way unless you're willing to come back to that support line. So KC, I just wanted to go over this. You know, I know what people are looking at when they're looking at stocks like this, but you're bottom fishing, and it's really why I want to go over this. I'm not saying that it doesn't work, but when you buy something like this, you must understand that you're going to be in it for a long time. The same people that thought it was cheap here at 38 had more people thought it was cheap here at 35, and those people got a real bargain at 32, right? So meanwhile, those people that were buying these dips, okay, just wasted 2 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days, and they're down 12.5%. So that's not really the guy or girl that you want to be, right? You want to make money with your positions. So you have to wait for them to be somewhat actionable. And there's nothing actionable about this. And it's one of the reasons why I want to cover it, right? You have this trend line right here, and you have another one right here. Now we can all see that the 21 is broken and the 50 is broken down and the 200's rolling. So there's really no reason to leave those in, but let's just show you this. Okay. So even if you get through that line, you have this line here. And I can draw that a little bit better by moving this up. So what is that really telling me? Right? It's telling me that I have a long way to go and I have a lot of work to do. So if you're willing to do that, then the very first thing you need to do is just get above something which you have not been able to do. And the very first something is 37.39. If you're willing to go through this, 37.39 would not only get you above this level, and we can zoom in on it, right? It would not only get you above these, but it would get you into this gap and give you some room to breathe. But you have to wait for that to happen before you get involved with it. LSPD looks great to me. It's not the day that people wanted to see. I'm sure they wanted it to go higher. I feel like there's too much on this chart. Let's just go this way with it. So I like this base. And this base, we talked about this before. It goes all the way back for close to since November. I think it looks great. The only thing that I would note that's worth noting is look at this. And here's your base here. We have this line that's pointing higher. We're going to get rid of that here. And I'm not really sure why we had this one for LSPD, but let's get rid of that. And let's throw this out. Let's go here. $82. Look at that line on 82. Okay. I mean, it doesn't get any cleaner than that, right? So you have a classic breakout after a run up and a base. There is literally nothing to do. If you want to get stopped out, you can look at the daily and figure out, where to put your stop. But this 78.89 would, to me, and closing below 82 would both be issues. I'm not sure that that's going to happen. I just see stocks that are staying above their trend lines and consolidating after large moves, or I should say support and resistance lines, and consolidating after large moves. I don't really have an issue with the action. I mean, I know that the action is not, the action's not exciting, but overall, if you take a look at what's going on out there, we're getting above every single key level that we need to, and things look fairly good. So I don't see anything here that's leading me to believe that I need to worry. Just stay with the trade and use these lines as support lines and resistance lines and stop levels. Nike, I wanted to go over because it was just a monster quarter. And frankly, the fact that you closed at the all-time high after opening here and you didn't sell down lets you know this is going a lot higher. So this is how you kind of figure out where these are going. And we can do this on the weekly. So you could see that break, right? Now look at this. Look at that volume. Okay, here's the last time we had volume like that. You can see the move. Here you can see the move, right? This is substantial volume. If you go here and look at this on the monthly, we're not even done the month yet, okay? And we're over the volume line. We're not even done the month and we're over it. So that tells you how powerful it was today over a 20-year span. That this line, right, that is literally 20 points over 20 years, that we are above that line and we still have a full week to go for volume. So just think about that. It's pretty substantial. I really would, what I would focus on with this is, what do we do now with it? And this is really a very easy play. And I'll walk through these lines in a moment. What we can do is actually, I can just get rid of, that's not the one I want to get rid of. I want to get rid of these. I want to get rid of the fib sequence and then show everyone how to draw them. So really what you're going to do here is, you see this break, right? This has to be your stop. Okay. Unless you're willing to ride and fill some of the gap down the, hopefully it stops at 48, but sometimes these can gap fill. So unless you're willing to take that risk, that has to be your drop dead stop. To me, it is. closing at the high leads me to believe that I don't even think that's a possibility. Not with this kind of volume, not when you're trading. And to just put this in perspective, right? Let's just look at today so you can understand this on a perspective basis. Okay. It's very rare for a large corporation like this to trade at 5 or 6 times that level. Very rare. So just consider that. And I really think here you can see a substantial push. So where would we go on this? And this one is worth spending a little time on. Let's get rid of all these horizontal lines, and we're going to get rid of all these lines, and let's take off all the indicators and just look at price. Everyone will remember it's Nike. So what you really need to do is look at the chart. Okay, that's the very first thing you need to do. You need to look at the chart and understand where the high and the low are, and don't just use a year, but use significant pattern recognition, right? So this obviously was pretty traumatic, and this was obviously our high. Okay, so that's what I'm going to use versus using 12 months. And what you're going to do is click on it, drop it, and look at your levels. Now, what's interesting about the way that I drew those versus someone that's just going to click on it for 12 months, right, is that my levels, look at where this 128 is, and look how it's support there. Look at this level, right? Look how this one just sits right there. Okay, so there's a reason why I use those levels, because that's pretty much what you're trading. People will say, oh, I'm going to use 12 months or 18 months. And the reason for that is because they're trying to quantify it. Well, you're trying to quantify something that's that's kind of unquantifiable. What you're really trying to do is figure out what people are doing, right? So if you're trying to figure out what people are doing, it's pretty much take the most traumatic events or euphoric events and then try and build your parameters around those. And you'll wind up with these lines because it's human nature. I mean, that's all fib levels are. It's human nature, where fear and greed are going to kick in essentially. And you can see now we have this one in here, and I mean, the triple tops here, but we knew that already because we put the line there. But what this is telling us is the following. This is our next level, 167.72, 168.30, in that range. That's your next level for this. I don't think it's going to take very long. I really don't. With a move like that on that kind of volume, I don't think it takes very long at all. So this got an upgrade today, and I just wanted to point this one out because I know there were a lot of people that were emailing me and talking to me about it today. And look, I got right to 569 and rejected. I think it's great that Goldman came out and recommended them. I would love to see another telecom company get involved, in what's going on out there, but I need to get to that 569 before I go near it. Everything else looks great with it. Light volume, very light volume. We don't really need to look at it. But just understand we got to get through that level. Pub M. So Pub M is one that's definitely on my radar and really what I wanted to see today, right? We were looking at this level, but here's what I really wanted to see, and then it just didn't happen. So here's that level. Let me see if I can get to it. Maybe I can get to it this way and you can see it. So when you're here, right, you see how you're breaking through this? I thought I could do this on a shorter time frame. I need to understand what's going on the left as well as the right. So when I understand that this is curling and jumping up, this is where I'm going to. I'm going to go to this 45.45. So you have to kind of look at that and get a sense of it, right? That's what I'm trying to do here. So here. Now, if I click on this and go to the high of this, you'll see, look at that bar and where you stopped. So I couldn't get over that red wick. And because of that, I wanted to just stay away from it until it clears that. Because usually if you have a red wick like that, and you see this, you see how you're in the middle and it's just indecision, that means you had a seller. So until that seller is completely cleaned up, I want them gone. And then I can get involved with it. Until then, I have no interest. But it is shaping up nicely and does look like it's going to go. But I just need it to do what it needs to do before I can get involved with it. But I do really like the trade, and I do think it works. But just watch that level. 42 3/4 would be more than enough to convince me. Qualcomm. So Qualcomm right here, I want to just go over this very quickly. It's not one we have to spend a lot of time on, but you got to get over that 200-day moving average. See how we're failing here over and over again? This is telling you you're going to fail again on it. So just keep that in mind. Now, let's just go through this here so we can understand this. This is Qualcomm on the weekly. Here's your support. Here's your, here's your support line right here. I mean, we can all see it, right? So let's come up top here. Okay, so you can see your lines. Now, get rid of these. Okay, so what line is really the most significant on the weekly chart? It's going to be this 141.32 level, right? So we're going to want to watch 141.32. That's really where we're going to be. Whereas that put us right around the same line that we couldn't hold before. So you can actually argue that 142 is the level that we're watching. And I like the name. I'm not going near it till I start clearing these levels because I've been there too many times, right? We've already seen how it's acting. So QFIN, I have on here because you just need to be aware. So for people, I'll just throw this over here really quickly. For people that have been following me for a little bit of time, they know how much weight I put in these upper trend lines. And it looks like this one, let's get rid of this for a moment so we can draw this perfectly. And let's get rid of this one. And you could see how we're hitting here. And this is off. This one is actually right here because that's where it happened the first time, right? So, and now let's see how we dance with it. So you can see hitting it, right? Where did we close today? Below it. When was the last time we closed below it? Here. What happened? We got a bullish engulfing bar, kind of, and we came right to resistance and failed. This is telling you it's tired. And when you get tired at these levels, what you do is you revert to a mean, and that mean is usually the 21-day moving average. So the reason I just viewed this one, in my opinion, I think it's heading back to the 38 level, and it's not something that I would stay in. Sophie, this did not have the best day. It broke down pretty violently, and we're going to go through this. So this is pretty significant stuff, and let's just review. If you're in this, you should be, to me, I would be concerned, and here's why. So not only did I get through the 50-day, I got through point of control, which is the heaviest volume at one price point on this chart. Okay, and I just sliced through all that support, all that volume, which means these people are getting out. Okay, that's not what you want to see. And then below you, you don't have any support. So your support goes away here. On top of that, see your spike here, and you see what you're dealing with here. You need to be very careful here. If you took out a lower low than today, right, and you just take that number out, which is, let's just figure it out real quick. The low of today is 1865. I would get out of the stock. I'd be gone. I wouldn't be playing around with it. This one was just an absolute monster today, and congratulations to the people that were buying it in the 20s. I thought they were never getting off the ground again, and boy, was I wrong. I mean, they just exploded to the upside. One could even say they rocketed, right? We can use cheesy jokes like that, but I have about 700 lines on this chart because I was looking at it all day, and this is really where you're heading to, this line right up here, right? Now, with a volume like this and this kind of spike, this is not going to stop. The question just becomes, are they going to do something? Are they going to issue a secondary? Are they going to issue bonds? Are they going to do something that's going to drive it down? That's really what you're looking for here. So on this weekly, that's what you have to decide. And to me, with this week's end, second highest volume it's ever had, I mean, this is going higher. It's just a question of when, and you're going to have to figure out how you're going to get into it. I tried a couple times today on different time frames, and it was a little hard. One worked very well, and you just have to kind of start looking at what's working for you on this trade and what it's respecting, right? So if you look at this today, I bought it at one point for a day trade. It did not work, and then I overlaid VWAP with it, and then was looking at an hourly chart. Here, let me get rid of all this other stuff so that you can really look at this. So then I overlaid VWAP with it. And, let's get rid of these other lines too, just so we're not focused on things that really don't matter. And we really don't need the volume for this. So all we were looking at was ran up. And now there was a simple trade here, but it failed the first time through. So I didn't really put a lot of credence in it. But clearing this first 15-minute bar was a clean sign that it was going to probably rally. And it rallied through it and then pulled back and then opened below it. So it just really wasn't something that, I was very interested in. But anyway, looking at this, see how we have our base, but look, here's your base right here. Right? So this is the close. This is the open and slash basically the low of the bar. This is where we go to. We undercut, test VWAP, broke above VWAP, and we were gone. Right? Now, even if you're not buying that level, as soon as you broke this wedge, there's your trade. Right? It's really, it's not much more complicated than that. We were watching this level all day right here. Okay, so you knew when you revert and you have like a little Morningstar pattern, the chance of this going, it might go. So then it just becomes a question of how you quantify your risk. How much risk are you willing to take? Do you want to buy it at 53 when it breaks here and use this as your stop? Do you want to wait for it to complete the Morningstar pattern? Do you want to wait for it to get above the baseline? Right? They're all questions that only people can answer for themselves on how much risk they're willing to take, and understand that this trade down here is riskier, right? You have a higher degree of probability of it failing than you do when it broke up here, but you paid less. You paid $1.50 less for it, right? But you have to realize when you're here, the probability of that trade working is less than the probability of that trade working here, right? Because this cleaned up that entire seller. And we know that. But that's what support and resistance lines are. So that's one way to play it. For me, I think this is going a lot higher. I think that, you had to take money off the table if you were in this today, because you just don't know what's going to happen next. But overall, and let's get rid of this here, this is really setting up to really move. And I think you're going to get through this, see a count down to here, and this just becomes a monster now. I really do. I think we're going to be talking about this one for a while. So definitely keep it on your radar. If you looked at this, hold on, let's just do this so people can understand where I'm going with this. So let's just do it this way. Okay. Let's just do a very simple peak to trough on what just happened. So you can start seeing your levels on where you're at, right? You can see how this was like a key level. This was a level. It's very interesting when you look at fib levels and look at where they actually lie and what starts transpiring around them. But you have resistance here, but then above that, you have this, 62.80 line. And this is telling you break that your next level is really 74 and then 81.5. So, and I think that's realistic over time. I think this is going to continue to move, but it's going to be a hard one to stay in because I think you're going to be all over the place. So 10 TEN, I just want to cover this one. It's one we've been watching for a while. We failed this line. Okay. And now we're failing this line. So let's look at that line on the weekly. Okay, this is what we're failing over and over and over again. Where's that line? 21.25. That is the peak of where we broke down here 2.5 years ago. It's the line I need to get over and close over in order to put the position on. It's not happening. So until that happens, you just need to avoid it, sit, watch, and wait. Tiger, this is really interesting. Every single time I think it's finally breaking this level. This is actually supposed to be at 89. Did it? Oh, it's giving me 93. We're just going to have to take that. So what you're seeing here is this wedge. And look at it. It broke down Wednesday. I'm like, oh, that's it. It's finally going to break. Bounces off the 21 week. And this is why it's so important to look at different time frames. I wasn't in the name, but if you were, you should be looking at that. And then it bounces and then wham, it goes. Just congratulations to those that stayed in this, especially after breaking down here. Here's my H. Then it looks like I'm trying to rally. Not really. I reverse and then I go. You need to get through this 29.93 level, and you have other couple key levels here that you keep bothering you, and 29.25 right here. This 27.70. So there's all these different lines you have to watch, but really the next big push for you, you should be able to see this going right across here. The next big push is right here. You can see that line, right?
Market data
29.5 gets you to 30.
re-established.
And then I think it can get you back up to these levels, like 35. So Wells Fargo just had, a monster day after selling down. I mean, these things all gapped down, and then what they do, reverted right to their mean. We talked about these trades earlier this week, and these are really very easy Bollinger Band trades. So what they do is they come out of the band and then pop back in the band, right? And then they revert to the mean. Now, once you flip the mean line, you can get to the top of that band again, but that's probably as far as you're getting. There was one that we actually went over that actually kind of worked, right? It broke here and then bounced. Just didn't have the bounce that I thought it was going to have, but there were still 2.5 points in it. The question is, what do you do with Wells Fargo now, right? I don't think there's a whole heck of a lot to do here. I think that, I don't expect these stocks to start taking out new highs anytime soon. And if you look at what's happening, you're running right into a resistance line. So it's not something that I'm going to be crazy to jump into or want to put my money into. And if I look at this, I just want to get into this a little deeper in greater detail, right? I'm still in a multi-year downward trend in this. I have no hurry for this. I have no interest and no hurry to be in this one right now. So Wing is a very interesting one. You are breaking, right? You broke this and you're heading higher. So let's see what happens with it. But I like this name. I really do. I like this name, and I think it has the possibility to keep going. There's a couple different lines you really need to look at on this one. But most importantly, I would focus on this downward trend line and the fact that we broke it. Your major trend line is really off of this point, and you're rallying through and up, right? That's your major trend line. There's minor ones here. There's a minor one here. There's a minor one on the other side of this here, but they're not this. This is the one you have to watch. This is your major trend line, and that's what you're trying to flip. Flipping this gets you back over that. So that's it in a nutshell. I hope this was helpful. And any questions, please reach out, please comment, and we'll go from there. Thank you very much.